Hi everyone, my name's Jordan and welcome back to my channel. Hi, Editing Jordan here to say I filmed 5 videos today. I'm trying to get ahead of the game because February is going to be really busy for me, so I decided let's knock out a ton of videos. Filmed all 5, felt so good with myself, then went to edit them and realized I have lipstick on my teeth for all 5 of them. So I'm sorry, I'm not refilming these 5 videos. Please pretend the lipstick is not on my teeth. It is what it is, guys. Today I'm going to be doing my biggest disappointments of 2022. I want to say before getting into this list, these are not by any means all incredibly bad books or anything. A lot of them were things that I was really hyped to read. They were some of my most anticipated releases, or it was books that had a lot of hype surrounding them that everyone else seemed to love that I just didn't love as much as everyone else. So most of these books I still gave like 3.5 stars or whatever. It was just books that I had hyped up a lot in my head and that I was really, really excited for that just didn't really live up to that hype. So don't come for me in the comments. A lot of these were they just didn't work for me as well as they did for others. These are also not in any particular order. I have not ranked these by like worst book to least worst book. They are all just a blob. Without further ado, let's get into it. First up, I have Fairy Tale by Stephen King. This was Stephen King's new fantasy release this year that everyone was super hyped for. I have a full dedicated review for it that I will link down below if you're interested in seeing my really in-depth thoughts. But overall, this one was a big letdown for me. I felt like it was not what I was expecting. I was expecting a really dark Stephen King book, and that was just, I think, my misconception. I don't think it was marketed that way. I don't think it was like poorly marketed or anything. I was just coming into it thinking it was going to be a really dark take on fairy tales. And instead what we got felt more like a coming of age, like YA portal fantasy kind of story. And once we went through this portal into this fantasy world, I felt like the pacing just ground to a halt. It got so boring. We had all these new characters that were just not developed enough for me to care about, and I just really was not that invested in the story. I listened to the audiobook, and honestly, if I had read it physically, I don't know if I would have finished it. Overall, just was a big, big letdown for me. I haven't read a Stephen King book as it's come out in a very long time, and so I was very excited for this. I was excited that it was going to be fantasy. I was excited it was going to be about fairy tales because I love fairy tales, and it just really didn't work for me, so I was really disappointed in this one. Next up, I have The Genesis of Misery by Neon Yang. This was an anticipated release for me because it was supposed to be a very inclusive, fast-paced sci-fi story that had mechs and magic and all of this stuff that I love in a book, and it did have all of those things, but the story itself just kind of fell flat for me. I felt like the main character was not very well developed, and then all the side characters might as well not even have been there. And the mechs themselves, while they were cool, I felt like a lot of the things that happened with them in the plot were convenient, and I felt like the dialogue was just really cringe, and overall I was just really disappointed in this book, and I was so upset about it because I thought that this was going to be a new favorite. I also have a full dedicated review for this book that I will link down below. I, again, think it was not a bad book. There were definitely points that I thought were really interesting. I think that the mechs as God and the control of these mechs was really well done. It was really cool. I just think that so much of the plot ended up being really convenient, and a lot of the character interaction just didn't really make a lot of sense to me, and there was like the insta-love trope, and overall there was just a lot of things that added up to me being overall disappointed in this story. Next up is probably one of my more contentious things on this list, and that is the first Law Trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. I read all 3 of them this year, and I did not think they were bad. I actually enjoyed them throughout most of it. However, they did not live up to the hype for me. I don't think this is a new favorite. I don't think that these are going to be a book that I'm going to want to come back to. I don't think about them often. Overall, the way Joe Abercrombie did grimdark in this trilogy ultimately didn't work for me, I think, because instead of it being a really dark world with a lot of dark things happening, which it did have to an extent, to me it felt more like an apathetic world where no one cared what was happening to them because everything was bad. And that really shone through to the point where I didn't care. Like, if no one else is going to care about the consequences and no one else is going to care about what's going on, why should I care? And the way it ended, some of it I thought was well done, but some of it felt like we had come full circle to a point where it was like, well, what was the point of me reading the book if like nothing changed by the end? So a lot of it just didn't work for me. I also have a full dedicated review to this trilogy that I will link down below. A lot of these, I guess I didn't even realize when I made this list. A lot of these I do have dedicated reviews for. So I have a dedicated review for this trilogy if you're interested in more in-depth of my thoughts. But overall, while I don't think this is a bad series, and I did enjoy it, and I loved Glokta, and I laughed throughout it, I just don't think it worked for me as well as it worked for some others. Next up, this will probably come as no surprise to anyone, I have The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. I read the first 4.5 books and decided to DNF. I have a video down below of why I'm DNFing The Wheel of Time if you are interested, again, in more in-depth thoughts. This series, I just don't think I like Robert Jordan's writing. The pacing was whack. The characters had the strangest interactions that did not feel like real humans. Like they didn't react to things and interact with each other in ways that felt believable at all. It all felt very bizarre. Some of the magic was really, really cool, and there were scenes throughout that I found so enjoyable and so interesting. There was just too much of the bad for me to get past it and continue with what was good, especially because I was coming up on the books that everyone calls the slog, and then they get better again once Brandon Sanderson takes over, and I just don't have the patience to read a bunch of huge books that I'm not fully enjoying. And at the end of the day, I realized I was 4.5 books in and I didn't care what happened to these characters, and so there was just no point in me continuing. So this was a big disappointment for me because this is some people's like really most loved series of all time. People love this series, and I was really upset because I didn't love it as much. I think a lot of the people I see that really love the series, a lot of it is based in a lot of nostalgia. A lot of people that read it when they were younger, like high school age, and then have gone back and reread it as adults, they like it a lot more, I feel like. So maybe if I had read this at a different point in my life, I would have liked it more, but 2022 Jordan did not like this series much. Next up, I have The Black Prism by Brent Weeks. This is the first book in the Lightbringer series, and this one was a big disappointment for me because I thought I would love it. This is a series that has a really, really cool magic system that's all based on light and prisms and like the color of light, and I find that fascinating. However, the character interactions and the way women were written and just a lot of the intricacies that went into it were just really not that interesting to me. The plot was interesting and the magic system was interesting, but I didn't like the characters, and I could tell that where this series was going was not going to be something I loved, and I've heard that the last book that came out, I believe, like nobody liked. So I just didn't feel very invested after reading the first one, and I think I got a little bit into the second one, and I didn't feel like super excited about it, so I just decided to DNF it. Maybe I'll come back to it later in life, like it might be a soft DNF, but it was kind of a letdown for me because I was really excited to get to it, just purely because of how cool I thought the magic system was. Next up is one I am very sad that it's on this list, and that is Fevered Star by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is the second book in the Between Earth and Sky trilogy, I think. I think it's a trilogy. It might just be a series. I'm not sure. But this is the second book, and the first one, Black Sun, was one of my favorite books of 2020, maybe 2021. I don't remember when I read it, but it was one of my favorite books the year I read it, and I was so excited for the second book to come out, and it was kind of a letdown. It definitely had middle book syndrome, second book syndrome, whatever. It felt like just a really big setup for the next book. The characters that we fell in love with in the first book, all of their interactions were kind of taken away from us because they all were kind of doing different things throughout it. A lot of what was going on was just people getting in place So overall, it was just kind of boring, and we didn't get all of those really fun character interactions that we came to love in the first one. But I'm hoping that this was just a case of middle book syndrome and that the third book will pull through and be phenomenal. And I have high hopes because the first one was great. I know Rebecca Roanhorse can write an incredible book, and I know she has good characters. There were still some good qualities in this book. I love the characters still. The magic is so cool. I just found that this second book was kind of boring, and it was a big disappointment for me. Lastly on this list is another well-loved series, another fan favorite, and I'm also obviously disappointed it's on here, and that is The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. I will say I've only read the first 3. I have not read Wrath yet, so my overall opinion may change slightly by the time I read that one. But so far, I've read the first 3 books, and I am just not getting the hype. They are enjoyable, the characters are interesting, the plot is cool. The magic, especially in the third book, gets really, really intense and really fun. But ultimately, I'm just not at the same level, I feel like, as a lot of people who say that this is one of their favorite series of all time. I find that there's so much death that it kind of takes away any stakes and takes away any attachment I feel to these characters, because like at any minute they could die. So like there's a lot of death of really big characters and minor characters, and there's just so much that at any moment anyone could die, so I just don't let myself get attached to characters. I find that there is way too many battle scenes, I was getting frustrated with them because a lot of them didn't feel like they added anything. There was also a lot of travel that, again, while necessary, could have been shorter. Overall, I think the series is too long, and that if it was trimmed down, it would be much, much better, much easier to get through, and might even make some of my other problems not feel as big, because it would be paced better. So overall, again, not a bad series. I am enjoying them. I would not read 3 books that are this chunky if I wasn't enjoying them. So I am enjoying them enough to read them, but they are not going to be a new favorite. I think even if Wrath is amazing, I still don't think this will be a new favorite series for me, just from the way I felt with these first 3 books. Overall, I still recommend it to people. I still think it's a fun fantasy story, but I just am not on the hype train. So that is my most disappointing reads of 2022. I definitely read worse books than these in 2022. They just weren't as disappointing because I didn't have as high of hopes for them. Some of them were just books I picked up on a whim, or some of them were books that I had heard a lot of people talking about, but I wasn't sure if I'd like it. So those ones I didn't include on this list because they're not fun to talk about. It's not fun to talk about books I just absolutely hated. So these are just books that, while I enjoyed most of them, I enjoyed parts of them, I was expecting to like them so much more than I did, and so they were disappointments. Thank you guys for watching. If you could please like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know down below what were some of your most disappointing reads of 2022, and if you don't have any, which is phenomenal, let me know what your favorite books of 2022 were. If you really like my content, please hit the notification bell to be notified every time I post new videos. As always, your support means the world to me, and until next time, thank you guys.